Very warm welcome to all of you. This meeting we decided on the topic of what are the qualifications required for stage 3, that is for starting Advaitic inquiry. Now, generally, why I thought about this topic was because most people have this feeling that they can just directly go to Advaita and they can start reading stuff of Advaita and then they will understand it. So that is a very uh, misleading thing because Advaita is not a kind of a philosophy which you can understand with your rational mind. Rationality is part of understanding Advaita, definitely, but you do need a very qualified mind uh, to actually decode the teaching. So, in most cases, you need a teacher for you to get the final breakthrough in Advaita. Now, I did not actually have a real teacher. This is a very strange thing with me because moved from Krishnamurti, and because of the immense pressure of my inquiry, the dedication, whatever, I slowly came to Advaita. And then I myself tried to figure out everything, and I was reading stuff on the internet, and finally I came across the teachings of James Swartz. And there was a particular teaching where he talks about the distinction between knowledge and experience. And that is the most fundamental thing, error, which all seekers make in their self inquiry. They are looking for some kind of stupendous experience to happen. They think they conflate enlightenment with some kind of blissful experience that is going to suddenly, some white light is going to come, and there's going to be some bliss all around, and you'll be exported in the state of happiness and all that. So that is the general conception of 99.9% seekers. If not this, then the second more refined conception that seekers have is that of Nirvikalp Samadhi. In fact, Phil was just what we mean by Nirvikalp Samadhi. So I should tell what Nirvikalp Samadhi means. It is basically a state of meditation. You lose all awareness of the body, mind, intellect. But it is not sleep. It is in the waking state. When you are in a meditative absorption state, you come to a certain state where you lose all awareness of body, mind, intellect. You also, during that samadhi, you don't know, just like in sleep, you don't come to know the time period of that samadhi. But once you come out of the samadhi, then you come to know that you were in samadhi, right? So this samadhi is usually conflated as enlightenment or the experience of enlightenment by many seekers. But this is not enlightenment. The reason being that if Nirvikalp Samadhi would confer you enlightenment, then sleep should also confer you enlightenment. Because even in sleep, you lose your identification with body, mind, intellect. There is no body, no mind, no intellect even in sleep, right? So, um, these two approaches, that of the second, third approach is that of Tantra, which talks about Kundalini rising from the base of the spine, going to the crown chakra, and then coming out from here, energy coming out from here, and all that. So that's what the tantra schools talk about, and there are certain blissful experiences associated with that. I've So you will find that all these approaches are not what Advaita is talking about. It is not talking about a state of experience. What it is talking about is to understand the nature of every single experience. So, enlightenment is not an experience. Enlightenment is knowing the nature of every single experience, what it actually is. So, a person who is supposed to be enlightened is supposed to be in a state of what is called sahaj samadhi. Sahaj means simple, and samadhi actually comes from the words sama means equal, and dhi means vision. Samadhi actually means equal vision. So a person who is in state of sahaj samadhi, he has got an equal vision. What is the meaning of equal vision? Equal vision means non-dual vision. What is meaning of non-dual? What is the dualistic vision? Dualistic vision is that you are dividing experience into pleasure and pain, fear and desire, good and bad, right and wrong. You are dividing this experience into opposites. And you're saying that I should have this experience and I should not have this experience. That is the root of all suffering. When we are dividing experience into two parts and saying that we should have this and should not have this. And what is non-dual vision? Non-dual vision understands that every experience is actually nothing but the same reality all the time. So a person who is in Sahaj Samadhi is not moving away or moving towards any experience. Whatever is happening because every experience is of the nature of truth. So the main task in self inquiry is not about reaching a certain state, a certain state of mind. And that's what we are all the time trying, isn't it? We have always been told that you should control your mind, you should suppress your mind, you should be calm, you should be this, you should be that. But non dual inquiry does not care. Basically, the most radical non dual inquiry, it does not care about states of mind. What it talks about, first word that comes in the four qualifications is what we call vivek. Not like the name of Vivek, right? That's the first thing. And Vivek means discrimination. That means the reality is already existent. You are already the truth. You are already the ultimate reality. But the ignorance has been superimposed on your reality. So, what is happening is that you are identifying with a superimposition and considering it to be the real thing. Now, the most famous example given in Advaita is that of the rope and the snake. So, you are walking in the night, you see a rope, and in the partial light, you mistake it for a snake. Now, when you see a snake, what happens? You get fear. So, what does that example show? That when you are not seeing reality as it is, then you are seeing with a this world of people, objects, experiences is all happening for real. That's the error. That I am this body mind, I am Anurag, I am this body which has taken birth and which is going through all the experiences of life and which is finally going to die. So, this vision that we have of reality is the problem. Now, what do all other dualistic approaches do? They accept this vision. They accept the fact that there is an individual, there is a world, and there is a creator of the world. Meta we say Jeev Jagat Ishvara, the triad, the triangle of the individual, the world, and the creator. So if these three, this triangle is maintained, then we come into duality. We come into an error what this world is actually. And how do we correct this error? We correct this error by negating these three things. We negate the individual, we negate the world, and we negate the God, the creator. Right? Now, theoretically, it sounds very simple, but in real life, it is amazingly difficult. Why is it difficult? Because you are conditioned. So yeah. So the main thing is now the main effort of self-inquiry, therefore, is not to correct your mind or to make it more beautiful, make yourself more better, a better individual, right? The whole world every single time is telling you you have to become a better person. There is something lacking in you and you have to become a better person. So that is not what self inquiry is telling you. Self inquiry is telling you you are the major mistake that you're making is that you think you're a person. So once you correct this mistake, then that entire psychological becoming of trying to become a better person, trying to become a happier person, right? Usually people think enlightenment is about becoming a happy person, right? It is said that way, it is marketed that way, but that happiness is not the happiness that comes through an experience. It comes as a result of what I said in the beginning, samadhi. That means you are fine with every single experience that is taking place because it is all truth. You're not moving away from some experience, you're not moving towards some experience with a will. So the qualifications that we require for Advaitic inquiry, because Vivek or discrimination is the most important thing, the highest qualification that you require for Advaitic inquiry is intellect. And what we mean by intellect, that's another problematic thing for most people, because the moment I use the word intellect, people generally feel it is about having a lot of knowledge. That's the Western notion of intellect, that if you have a high intellect, you know, you can do science, you can do engineering, you can do high technology, you can solve problems. That's not what is meant by intellect in Advaita. Intellect in Advaita means you have got the capacity to discriminate between awareness and its objects, between the unchanging self and the changing objects, between the rope and the snake, between eternal and transient. So that is intellect. It has got nothing to do with the knowledge that you have gathered by reading books. So, in traditional Advaita, basically that intellect is created through what is called Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. Now, in Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, I won't go into the details of it, but it relies on the concept of God. So there is the creator God, and that concept is made use of in both Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga to take you away from doership. The main problem that Advaita sees is that your individuality is very much associated to what? It is very much associated to the thinker, doer, experiencer. Isn't it? That's how you consider yourself to be an individual. You think yourself to be a thinker who's thinking and making choices and then taking actions based on certain experiences. So, Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, in a particular way, not all schools, in the Advaitic way, if you do that, it trains you to slowly uh, develop your intellect, and then you enter into stage 3 Advaita or Gyan Yoga, which is knowledge yoga. So it is very clear that no action, this has to be very clearly understood, no action can lead you to enlightenment, which means no meditation, no chanting, no, any of this. And at the highest levels of meditation, Nirvikal Samadhi, nothing can lead you to enlightenment. The reason being, action is always involving a duality between a subject and an object. So, the moment you come in action, you're already thinking yourself to be an individual and therefore acting as an individual. So, this is something which is very difficult for people to grasp because they are always thinking that I am a suffering person, I have got a suffering experience, and I have to do something in order to get rid of this experience of suffering. But Advaita makes it very, very clear that no amount of action, no worshipping, no chanting, no meditation is going to actually help you understand the true nature of reality. Now, this doesn't mean that Advaita completely does away with these approaches. It says that it is required for sharpening your intellect till the time your intellect is not qualified to enter into Advaitic inquiry. You need Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga. Basically, Advaita doesn't divide Bhakti and Karma because every yoga is an action. So it bunches all of the approaches in Karma Yoga, right? But now I do not teach traditional Advaita because I myself did not do Bhakti or Karma Yoga, and moreover, even Advaita is very clear that when you enter Gyan Yoga, as I told in the beginning, the triad of Jeev, Jagat, Ishvara is going to be eliminated for you. So, if it is possible for people to start off without the concept of at least God, so you will have just two more concepts to get rid of. You will not have to figure God out. You don't have to cancel him out. You will just be left with individual and the world. And that is why I teach according to the teachings of Krishnamurti, because Krishnamurti does not actively talk about God or creation, and most of his teaching, I won't say his entire teachings, but most of his teachings are towards developing discrimination. When we talk about so when we talk about the primary qualification, which is that of Vivek. So the four qualifications, I think you all know, they are Vivek, Vairagya, Shat Sampat, and Mumukshutva. So Vivek stands for discrimination, Vairagya means detachment, Shat Sampat means set of 6 mental virtues, and Mumukshutva means intense desire for enlightenment. So I'll just do a quick, just give a quick definition. Vivek, you already know. Vairagya means detachment. Now that detachment is not, now again there are two approaches here. So one is a very physical detachment where you are saying, I want to do self-inquiry and I have got nothing to do with the world. So I'm going to take renunciation and I'm going to devote my entire life to self-inquiry. I will be like a monk. Now, that is one model of self-inquiry, definitely, but that is not the only model which Advaita talks about. Because if you read in Bhagavad Gita, it talks about two approaches to uh, enlightenment. One is that of the sannyasi, and one is that of the householder. So it says that even the householder can reach enlightenment. The vairagya that they talk about there is not the physical vairagya. And it actually says, there's a verse out there in the Gita which says that even though if you are physically detached from everything, but mentally you're attached to the objects, you are like a thief. So you may be sitting in one place in a forest and your mind may be on some, some lovely object which you would like to acquire, right? So that the Gita is saying that it is not the physical detachment that is primary. What is primary is the mental detachment. Now, some people think that mental detachment to mean that you have to practice detachment, because there are many approaches which talk about practicing detachment. That you force yourself to, suppose you like food very much, right? And you say that, okay, from now on I'm not going to have this food and that food. I've seen many people doing it, my grandmothers and all that. Many people close to me also, right? They give up food. So so uh, what is there? There is the thinker doer experiencer still operating, right? You are thinking yourself to be the eater of food. Okay, so awareness is not the eater of food. Awareness doesn't need food to be alive, right? So, so detachment in Advaita means what? It means that you are able to see objects as objects. You are able to discriminate every single object in your experience. What happens when you get very sad? You feel that I am sad, right? And then you fail to see that you are not actually sadness, you are actually the one who is aware of the sadness. If sadness was you, it would not change, it would not be a changing state, right? You wouldn't be changing. One moment you're sad, the next moment you're happy, and the next moment you're neutral, next moment you're calm. So these all states, emotional states, what we call the experiencer. So we confuse that we are the person who is going through these states. But once you understand that you are actually the awareness, your awareness of these states never ever changes. You were aware that you were sad, you were aware that you were happy, you were aware that you were neutral, you were aware that you were calm, right? So the awareness has never changed. So once you are able to discriminate between the passing states and awareness, it automatically brings detachment. So in Advaita, the actual means of detachment is not through practice but through vivek, through discrimination. And if you see, this point is brought out most powerfully, most consistently in the teachings of Krishnamurti. He never talks about discipline, control, and he actually shows how In fact, many of his teachings actually add a very rich to Advaita. They show how discipline and control are actually caused due to conflict. They cause conflict because you have what is, which is actually happening with you right now, and then you erect a standard, what should be, right? And what is happening between what is and what should be, there's a gap. I am violent right now. I must not become violent. I get angry right now. I must not get angry. So, what is happening is instead of looking at this anger, what are we doing all the time with every single movement? We are making its opposite. I am in pain right now. I must be in pleasure. So the moment we have a movement coming in our mind, we build its opposite and we don't want to deal with this movement. We don't see this movement at all. We instantly modify this movement. We project an ideal state and we want to reach that state. And this movement is actually the root of all psychological becoming and conflict. And till the time we don't understand this point, and this is what I teach in the stages of self query in stage one. In stage one, what the participants, what the seekers have to understand is to find out all ways in which you have been conditioned by society to become in some way or the other, become a pure moral person, become an ethical person, you become a loving person, you become a famous person. So all these ways of psychological becoming has to first end before you enter into stage 3 Advaitic inquiry. If any of these becomings are there, you will be continuously identifying yourself with the thinker, doer, experiencer. Every single level. I mean, there are levels and levels to this. For example, even the desire to be a good person, a social worker, to be helping the world, even that is a sort of a psychological becoming. You are trying to create an identity for yourself, right? So Krishnamurti's teachings are very, very, very precise, very perfect to unearth all forms of psychological becoming. And only when that happens can you start developing your intellect, which will start developing discrimination and which will develop detachment. So you don't have to develop detachment separately. The moment discrimination starts happening, detachment happens on its own, right? You don't have to force anything on you. So this is something which is very different in the teachings which I do, which is in line with what Krishnamurti says. And the rest two qualities, the set of 6 virtues, I will not go into much detail about it because they are all automatically developed when you are in the process of choiceless awareness, which Krishnamurti talks about, when you are ending your psychological becoming and you have entered into a state of pure observation, right? So what Krishnamurti says, that all the time you are using an instrument to do things in the world. What is the instrument that you're using? You're using thought, isn't it? We are all the time using a thought to think what to do, to think how to do things. And he asks a question, have you ever examined the instrument itself? We are using thought. He says you use thought for self-inquiry. But have you ever examined the instrument itself? Have you ever examined thought itself? And once you come, once you understand that till the time you are in psychological becoming, you are actually being led by thought. Thought is your leader. And only when all forms of psychological becoming are investigated like a detective and ended, then you come to stage two, where you come to pure observation stage. And that's when you start understanding the nature of thought. So you're not caught up in particulars. You're not caught up in my thought, oh, I think this way, and I think that she thinks that way, and he thinks this way. It doesn't happen that way any longer. When you reach the height of observation, you are looking at the whole of human thought. And that's what Krishnamurti is consistently pointing. He's saying, your thought and my thought are the same, they are not different. You fear, you desire, even I fear and I desire. I may just have some superficial differences, but deeply thought is the same for the entire humankind. So, so in order to reach stage three, you should have come to the pure observer stage where your attention has turned to thought itself. And then what happens is when you have a movement like fear coming in your mind, you are no longer projecting the opposite. You are no longer saying, I am having fear, I should have a better experience. I am now in pain, now I should have bliss. So I will keep searching for bliss in meditative states or in chanting or in worshipping, What is the root of that action? The root of that action is you're running away from a present experience. You don't like the present experience and you want to change it. So you do a certain set of actions. But what is the base of that action? That you do not want this particular experience. That base is never gone. So when you come to choiceless awareness, you're not interested in changing your action. You're not interested in what the instrument is capable of doing or not doing. You get interested in understanding this instrument itself. You get interested in understanding, is thought itself capable of understanding something which is beyond space and time, which is beyond any form of change? Can thought do this? And for that, you have to understand each and every movement of thought. And the biggest movement, if you want to understand thought, there's only, if you just understand one movement of thought, which is fear, right? Just take fear and just observe fear in all its dimensions, and you will understand thought. So you will also see this emphasis in Krishnamurti's teachings. He talks a lot on fears of different kinds. And so what is fear? Fear is actually like a tree which has got leaves, branches, then the trunk, and then the root. So when you are coming from stage one to stage two to stage three, you are actually moving from the leaves of thought to the branches to the main trunk, and then finally in stage three, when you get your Akhandakara Vritti, you finish off with the root, entire root of thought. What all the other approaches do, they will deal with the leaves and the branches, not with the root of fear. And so what does Advaita say as the root of your fear? The root of all your fear is that you think yourself to be a person who has been born and who is going to die. That is the root of your entire tree of fear, right? So, so what choiceless awareness is actually doing is helping you come from the leaves to the branches to the trunk, right? And I have been guiding different students, and I do come to know when they are crossing different parts of their journey. So when they are at the leaves, I talk in a different way. When they are at the, when I talk to, when I am at the branches level, I talk to them in a different way. When they come to the trunk level, I start talking in a very different way, right? So, and generally, it always is very sharp because I have to cut at all those identifications which your mind has got used to. What is identification? What is ignorance and identification? It's basically an addiction, right? You're addicted to a certain way of thinking, and your mind is going to revolt when that addiction is going to be removed from you. What is the addictions? All forms of beliefs that we have formed. I have seen people who are terribly addicted to God, right? And the problem is that, especially, I don't know about other countries, but in India, it's a very socially validated thing. If you are worshipping, if you are, so there's a whole lot of cultural, dynamics around it related to worship of God. So, for basically to understand fear, you have to observe your mind as it is, not how you want it to be. Because the moment you say it is this, I want it to be this, the conflict starts. And how do you observe fear? Why is it difficult for you to observe fear? Why is it that the mind, the moment fear comes in, the mind just without your awareness, it will start off its dance. Various kinds of escapes the mind has made to move away from fear. Hundreds and different kinds of escapes. And you have to watch every single fear and every single escape that your mind is trying to make. Once you go through this phase and you understand, you start coming from the branches to the trunk, that's when you will shift to stage 3. Because by the time you have come to stage 3, you have to be convinced about one thing, that nothing, no object in the world gives you permanent happiness. This has to become very clear with you. Now, there's a little, there's something very interesting about this. If you say that no object in the world gives you permanent happiness, so Padak say, okay, so there's no point doing all what we are doing. Let's move to the forest, let's go to the cave, and let's become a sannyasi. So that's the general tendency when I say something like that. Now, I am not trying to say that pleasure is wrong. This is a very important point. I'm not talking about good and bad and right and wrong. I am talking about true and false. I am not saying that you should leave the world, you should leave your pleasures, you should leave everything, all objects means even relationships. Why should I relate to everyone? This person is an object to me, this person is going to die. So why should I relate to this person? Right? Why should I love anyone? So you have to understand the statement that I'm making. I am trying to say the understanding that objects are not going to give you lasting happiness. I'm talking about an understanding. I'm not talking about an action over here, right? If you take Krishnamurti has talked a lot about relationship. In fact, what I love about his teachings is that he says that you can learn about fear in your relationships. That is where fear can be studied the most. We have got so many different kind of fears in relationships. Fear of being judged, fear of social disapproval, fear of losing someone's love, fear of losing someone's affection. So, in the teachings of Krishnamurti, he's not asking you to move away from relationships. He's not asking you to move away from the world. He's asking you to observe fear as it operates in the world. And he says that there is a possibility of having relationships which are free from the operation of fear. So once you reach stage 2 end, mature stage 2 end, you do develop a certain kind of detachment, but that's not a detachment which is physically, it's a kind of a mental detachment by which you are able to see the entire movement of an emotion as it arises and as it falls. And once you reach that, and the teacher with whom you are studying is able to see the quality of that mind, which is not getting caught in the web of emotions, then that teacher starts unfolding the teachings of Advaita. Now, you must be very clear the teachings of Advaita is not a philosophy. It's not that you're going to get something there. Advaita is it's like a thorn, it's like a tool. It's a tool which is going to remove your last ignorance, the root of all fear. It is meant to remove that root of all fear, and then it will end. The teachings will end. You don't carry the teachings. They are not something to be worshipped like a book. You know, in India, we have this Bhagavad Gita pe haath rakh ke kasam khata hu main. So, you know, they have converted that teaching of Bhagavad Gita into some sacred relic. That's not what Advaita is. In fact, in the very Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse which says that the knowledge of all the Vedas is useless for a person who's got self-knowledge. It's of no use to that person. So it is very irreverent to itself. The Bhagavad Gita is very irreverent to itself. At one passage, of course, there are other passages where the bhakti is more prominent. It's a little confusing book according to me, Bhagavad Gita. So I take certain parts of it and leave certain parts of it. And Krishnamurti is more consistent, logical, rational, appealing to the modern mind, not renunciate mode. And I feel he takes you in my own journey. I did around 17 years of Krishnamurti and just 2-3 months of Advaita, just 2-3 months of Advaita, and I got the Akhandakara Vritti. But let me tell you that getting the Akhandakara Vritti is not an insurance for that you have reached the final end of suffering. A lot depends upon your prior journey. So you may get your Akhandakara Vritti fast, but if you have not done the initial journey of stage 1 and stage 2 a lot, then you will have to work hard even after stage 3. But if you have taken a long stage 1, stage 2, in which you have worked very hard and then you get an Akhandakara Vritti, it's quite possible that you will have to work less in stage 3 in order to reach stage 4. So it is no point rushing stage 1 and stage 2. See, stage 3 is a sandwich. It's a very, it's a stage where you get the knowledge, but then again you will be coming to somewhat what is called choiceless awareness. Just that in choiceless awareness in stage 2, you are dipping, you are going up and down. You tend to lose your awareness and then you get it back. You have to put some effort. But in stage 3, the knowledge ensures that the effort that you have to put in being aware is very less. Again, it depends a lot on your vasanas, but over a period of time you will move from what is called witnessing to a stage called what I call remembrance. So in witnessing you are still, trying to discriminate between the awareness and the objects. You have to keep aware and alert, and then finally you come to a stage where you don't even have to witness, you just have to remember I am self. You just remember the knowledge and you're back into a indestructible reality. So I think I took 1 hour, right? But that was my introduction for the 4 qualifications that you need to develop. I did not speak about Shad Sampad, the wealth of 6 virtues, and intense desire for enlightenment. The last one is very clear. You don't have to understand much in it. The 6 virtues, as I said, is developed automatically if you are developing choiceless awareness. So actually, in my teachings, the 4 qualifications are not developed separately. They are developed only with the first one, which is Vivek. You develop Vivek, you develop all the rest. Uh, with that, I end my talk for today.